Ladies and gentlemen, we will start, and some more people may join us, but let's not waste time, and let's have now this 60 to 9 minutes interesting discussion, and let's really use the opportunity to have here distinguished Israelis who came to Prague to use the opportunity to the maximum to find out what is happening in Israel, what we can expect, what is happening around Middle East, how to read Donald Trump's entertainment, how to get it seriously, what to expect there, and basically how to find out more what we should be ready for. The four distinguished guests are and I marked that differently, sorry. Yossi Mann, researcher at the Department of Middle Eastern Studies in Bar Ilan University, also affiliated with Reichman University, formerly IDC, and we did have program jointly with IDC here between Severo and Reichman or IDC, and he focuses on the oil industry, energy markets, Gulf, GCC, all those relations linked to this part of the world, to that part of the world, and I guess also the Israeli relations with that part of the world. Then we have Gedalia Afterman, head of the Asia-Israel Policy Program at the Abba Eban Institute for Diplomacy and Foreign Relations, and lecturer at Reichman University and Tel Aviv University, the Israeli expert on China, and who supposedly understands China the best from the Israelis, as I was told, not by Gedalia, but by Mark. Okay. The third distinguished guest is Eli Bar-On, a former civil servant and an expert in national security and international relations, co-founder of the executive director of the MENA 2050, a London-based international organization dedicated to the regional developments of the Middle East and North African region. And last but not least, but someone who is known here at this institute, who is not here for the first time, Mark Regev, a veteran Israeli diplomat and former Prime Minister Senior Advisor for Foreign Affairs, also government spokesman, but former government spokesman, I should underline, so he's going to be speaking in his personal capacity, not on behalf of government, and that's why he will be more free to speak and to tell us something interesting. And at the moment, he is chairman of the Abba Eban Institute for Diplomacy and Foreign Relations in Herzliya at the Reichman University. So we have agreed that each will give a few minutes of overview. What is the Israeli situation, Israeli view, what to expect from that point of view, and then we will have the discussion, and of course there will be floor for your questions afterwards that we are, and we will make sure that nobody of us is bored in the next 60 to 90 minutes. Yossi.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your hospitality, for the warm hospitality. It's a great privilege to be here. Let me just add one small detail, that I'm also a Czech citizen. My grandparents were born here. They were always grateful to the Czech nation, and always happy to be here with you.
You are one of the 5 religious Czechs.
Yes, probably. We'll establish a new synagogue soon. Anyway, let me start with that. We in Israel consider this year as a strategic year. And I'm saying that it's not after Trump became a president. We thought that it is a strategic year before he was elected. And let me start with a few fronts and explain why we consider it as a strategic year. Let's start with Iran. I think all of us now understand the threat that is coming from Iran. I think for years Israel declared that Iran is a threat to the world, and now after the war in Ukraine, the aggressiveness from Russia, and the fact that the Iranians supplied material and weapons to Russia in order to attack you can explain us how dangerous is the regime in Iran. However, we consider this year the potential to do more when it's come to Iran. And I'm saying it because there are several elements that came together to create a change in Iran. And I think every state considers a different perspective what should be in Iran. Of course, Israel would like to see to maybe a different regime or to end the nuclear program. But if you look at Iran, if you think about Iran, they lost all of their assets, most of their assets abroad. We see what happened in Syria. We saw what happened in Lebanon, okay? Even in Gaza. But that's also a risk for us because it means they will need to protect the regime, and it will be quite difficult to convince them to give up on their nuclear project. However, if you look at the situation, the economic situation in Iran, see the currency, which is extremely low right now even more after the presidency of Trump, you see a lot of challenges. And it's not just the economy. We all know that Iran is relying on oil, and the price of oil are quite low, and the sanctions are becoming effective. There is less demand in China, and there is a lot of spare capacity. Okay, there is enough oil to cover on Iran. Let's say we will have like 100% sanctions. So we in Israel consider it a strategic year when we can isolate Iran and don't feel the results when it comes to the energy sector. Allow me to go to the Syrian front. I think in Syria we have two perceptions. One, okay, we see there is a challenge in Syria, meaning there is a new regime, that the background of the leaders are Salafi, jihadist, and that's a risk for Israel. And when it comes to the region, when we think about maybe bringing Iran to collapse, it means that maybe there is more powerful regimes which are pro-jihadist, Salafi, Sunnis regimes. So we need to think if it's right, if we are acting right, if it's the right way maybe to threaten Iran, and then we'll get another state which is more jihadist state. And this is something we need to think about. However, there is also potential in Syria. Okay, we share, I would think, several things together. Syria and Israel now share the need to fight against Iran, maybe to weaken Hezbollah. So there is also a potential with the Syrian regime to do something. Okay, when it comes to Hezbollah, when it comes to Iran, and in my feeling and the information I get, there is also opportunity they will not demand evacuation, an Israeli evacuation from the Golan, and actually they will not speak about the Palestinian issue until their regime will be stable. When it comes to the Palestinians, I unfortunately don't think there is a capability to change the regime to a pro-Israeli regime in Gaza. I think that the next regime in Gaza, and we see it in the recent days, will probably Fatah. And I think, first of all, they are the only one that can take charge in Gaza. I think the Saudis will demand they will replace the Hamas. And they are actually the only one who understand, the culture, the mentality, and what's happening in Gaza. That's my opinion, and I think that in Gaza we'll see Fatah in the next few months or years. Last, I think we should share the threat that is coming from the Houthis. Houthis is not attacking Israel, but obviously they are not attacking just Israel, they're attacking the world. And I think this is a new front we need to go to create a coalition in order to deal with this new enemy. And I just told Mark and Gedalia that some of the Fatah members who came back to Gaza actually studied in Yemen. So actually Israel now having a border, kind of a border with Yemen, with the Houthis. And I think that it's a new threat that might influence other fronts, okay, like maybe in Syria, maybe in Gaza once again. And this is something we need to deal and discuss, how to confront the Houthi challenge and the threat. Thank you.
Dario, please.
Okay, can you hear me all right? Thank you very much. Happy to be here. I'll add something maybe on the regional perspective. I think, obviously, in Israel, for natural reasons, we've been focusing a lot on Gaza, on the Palestinian issue, on the immediate borders, as Yossi was talking about, but I think we need to take an even broader look, because what will determine Israel's strategic future in the end is the region and the geopolitical reality, the superpower competition. And I say that both in terms of an opportunity and in terms of a challenge. And I'll say a few words about that, and then we can talk about it maybe during the conversation more. One, in terms of the challenge. China has become a very influential player in the Middle East, not a military player, a technological, economic, infrastructure player in recent years. And that, I think, is not going to change. Two interesting things happened this week on that front, and I don't only mean Trump's proposal. The first, you probably heard about it, was the unveiling of the Chinese DeepSeek AI system. Now, why is that interesting in the Middle East? It's interesting because China and the US are competing on AI in the Gulf, in the Middle East. The UAE specifically, which is the leading power, decided to go with the US. And then China unveiled a model that showed that the US is actually not leading that competition. So the US lost its technological edge, even on AI in their eyes. Second, the idea, if you take Trump's proposal seriously about Gaza, so the idea of the US being bogged down in Gaza for the next 15 years is a real dream come true for Beijing. That's exactly, if you're a Chinese strategist working with the Middle East, that's what you want to hear. You want to say, the US is continuing with failed wars, killing innocent people in the Middle East, and China is bringing progress, future, technology, infrastructure, and that's the way I think they will present it as well. So I think when we're thinking about these things, we need to think also how the big blocs will play, and if you're the countries in the Middle East, in the end, which side do you take? Right? And there's a big dynamic in that sense. Now, in terms of the opportunity, if we're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and ending the war, in my view, the solution will have to be regional. And for it to be regional, for example, we hear a lot about normalization with Saudi Arabia. That's not only because everyone cares about Israel and the Saudis, right? When the Americans think about Israel, Saudi Arabia, they think about countering China in the Middle East. There is a strategic initiative called IMEC, I don't know if you heard about it, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which is an American counter or an American economic initiative that's meant to replace or to be as a counterweight to China. It's important for Israel because if it happens, that will be a way to position Israel completely different in the world, in the Middle East, in Asia, and with Europe. It will no longer be bilateral, but will be part of this bloc.
Thank you. Eli.
Thank you so much, and hello everyone. Always a great pleasure to come back here. I visit Prague 2-3 times a year. It's always great. I remember a few years ago I went to a restaurant here and I asked for the check and I was answered, which one of them? We have millions of them. Ever since I always ask for the bill. I'll start with a very personal note, if I may. I think the last 6 months have been the saddest period in the life of every Israeli. We are still a very much traumatized society. What happened on October 7 was very personal to each and every Israeli. Me personally, my family, we don't live in the area around Gaza, but my daughter lost 6 friends in the past 18 months. I lost a friend on October 7. 7 of my friends lost their children and 2 others lost their mothers. and one other. His father was kidnapped, 86 years old, and then killed in Gaza. So just as an example to show you how it became so personal to so many people. So we were dragged into this war. I think 16 months later, it would be fair to say that Israel has done an exceptional good military work around the region, not only in Gaza, but also in Lebanon, in Iran, in Yemen, and elsewhere, in Syria. But I'm afraid Israel has not done well enough strategically and diplomatically. If we take all these arenas, all these places where Israel has been fighting, there seems to be an anticipation that something will follow. At the end of the day, the war is just another diplomatic tool, as we know, the tool you use when all other diplomatic tools have failed. And we haven't seen it yet, not in Lebanon, not in Syria. We'll say a few words about the Palestinian arena in general, and Gaza in particular in a moment, but I think the opportunities are there. I think Israel is in a position to generate a discourse about diplomatic relations with Lebanon, with Syria. I don't think it can happen tomorrow, but suppose Israel was suggesting that other than the security settlement in Lebanon, we would also open an offer to start a political dialogue for a peaceful resolution of the situation. Again, it would not have happened tomorrow, but it would have generated a discourse, an internal discourse in Lebanon. In Syria, I agree with Yossi. The current government in Syria is, I don't think they will change their colors overnight. They are Salafis, jihadists. The fall of Bashar al-Assad was good news, not only for Syria, but to the region and to the world. He had it coming after everything he has done over the past 14 years. And it's good news also in terms of what it means for Iran, because Iran was pushed out of Syria and became much weaker in Lebanon. Having said that, I think Israel should find a way to engage with the current Syrian government, if only to check the possibility of normalizing ties with them. I think obviously there are risks in that, but imagine this, let's say at the very least, Muslim Brotherhood government, and also maybe with a jihadi background, recognizing Israel, normalizing ties with Israel. What will it mean to all the other jihadi groups in the region? I think the message will be very powerful. It also poses a rare opportunity for Israel to work with Turkey, with which there was no love lost ever since October 7 and before, to work on a more cooperative way. That's an opportunity we should at least look at. Iran has been hit hard in the past 16 months. I think it's became very clear that Israel is the superpower of the region, a military hegemon in the region. But again, if we don't find a way to translate it into politics, into diplomacy, we've done nothing. So with the Iranians, I think it's a good thing that there could be a credible military threat against Iran, but at the same time, the alternative, the peaceful alternative, should also be on the table. So I'm not a big believer of anything good coming out from the current Iranian regime. I think it goes against their raison d'etre to work with Israel or recognize Israel or anything even close to that. But at the same time, after they've been hit so hard, they allowed a reformist president to run in the elections and win the elections. I think there's a chance here at least to mitigate the Iranian rhetoric, to find a way to make them freeze the current race to the nuclear bomb, and maybe create some sort of a modus vivendi we can live in until the current supreme leader passes away. And he will be, as we know, is one of the last dinosaurs alive from the 1979 revolution. So that might also be a turning point for Iran. Again, I'm depicting everything in a very optimistic manner. You could dive deeper into the details later, but just as an opportunity. I agree with Gedalia entirely as to the regional approach. I think everything happening now in the Middle East should be looked at through a regional lens. It's very clear that the Abraham Accords change the current state of affairs in the region. The good news is that none of the countries who normalized ties with Israel retracted, even at the worst time of the most fragile, challenging time in the history of relations between Israel and its neighbors. The bad news is that Israel did not capitalize on these relations to do more in the region, use it as a way to mediate with other actors in the region, and the option of expanding that, expanding the accords, normalizing ties with Saudi Arabia, and have an important Palestinian component in this deal is the only way to do it looking forward. I don't see any way in which Israel resolves the conflict with the Palestinians on a bilateral effort, only on a regional effort. I leave it with this, and maybe we can go into more details later.
So the Middle East is often known for bad news. And you've heard from all the three people who spoke before me, there's actually reason for, I think, hope, and we can see a positive trajectory. And I will talk about two things that I think are very hopeful for Israel, but also hopeful for the whole democratic world and for stability in the Middle East. Number one, you have to remember that until recently, the fundamental Israeli strategic fear was focused on Iran, their nuclear program, but also their plan to encircle Israel, yes? And they had the ability to threaten us from the north through Hezbollah in Lebanon and from Syria with Assad. They are working very hard to work with radical Palestinians on the West Bank to bring in weapons and technology and so forth to build a terrorist army there. So the stability of Jordan, there were all these reports that Iran was trying to build a destabilized Jordan. So what they have in the north, they were trying to do in the east. And of course, in the south, we know that they were working very closely with Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And the Iranian plan was, when the Iranians say they want to destroy Israel, I would like to tell you it's only rhetoric, but unfortunately no, it's policy of the government, the policy of the state. And they have, one way of doing it is this, they are building their nuclear program. And the second idea is to encircle Israel and to do one October 7th and another October 7th until Israel becomes a position where people cannot live there anymore. And in the last couple of months, the situation has totally changed, as was said by my predecessors. The situation in Lebanon is totally different. Hezbollah has not been destroyed, but it has been greatly, greatly weakened. And Lebanon elected a president that Hezbollah a year ago would never have allowed him to be elected president. He was elected president with the support of the United States and the Saudis and others. The situation in Lebanon for Israel today is much more advantageous than it was 6 months ago. In Syria, now I have no illusions that these Islamists who have taken over in Syria are going to be friends of Israel necessarily. I hope they will be, but I think we have to be realistic. But Syria is no longer under the Iranian tutelage. Syria is no longer an Iranian satellite. And this is a huge change. It also immediately affects Lebanon, the ability of the Iranians to rearm and re-equip Hezbollah in Lebanon, because it was all done through Syria. And so this change in the north, together with the destruction of Hamas's military machine in Gaza, together with when we responded to the Iranian missile attacks on Israel, and we responded and we destroyed their missile defense system, and they are open, they know they are open, they are naked. We can, if we choose to, hit, I think, almost any target inside Iran. I'm not saying we're going to do it, but they know we have the possibility. And so this Iranian threat of trying to encircle Israel has fallen apart. It's an amazing change for Israel and for the region. An amazing positive change. There are still challenges. We don't know what will be in Syria. Hezbollah is still there, Hamas, but they have all been greatly weakened. And this is good news. And the second piece of good news, which was spoken about by the outgoing Biden administration and spoken about by the incoming Trump administration, is the Israeli-Saudi normalization. Everything that I understand and the people I talk to, this is very, very serious. Very serious. Blinken, in his farewell interview, the one he gave to the New York Times, he says, we've done the work. He takes all the credit, yes? And Trump will now just pick up the pieces. And Trump is saying, this is the expansion of the Abraham Accords that I did, yes? But this is very, very real. This is very, very real. And I don't want to offend our friends from the Emirates or from Bahrain or from Morocco, but Saudi Arabia is more important. Saudi Arabia has a special status in the Arab world. It has a special status in the Islamic world. And if Saudi Arabia makes peace with Israel, that's a game changer. It's an earthquake. Now, they're not doing it because they suddenly became Zionists, yes? They're doing it because they see it as in their national self-interest, and what everyone said before me about the regional framework, I 100% agree. The region is changing. A breakthrough with Saudi Arabia will help cement that change. It's doable. It could happen even this year, I hope. There's every reason to believe. One of the big motivations of the Saudis is they want to upgrade their defense relationship with the United States, yes? They want a formal NATO-type commitment to their security. They can only do that if President Trump controls Congress. This is only in the next 2 years. After that, it's open. We don't know. This is why it could happen now, for Saudi reasons. And for Israel, I said before, it's a game changer. Hamas represents the part of Islam which is the most hostile to the West, the most hostile to Israel, the most reactionary, totalitarian. The Saudis are not liberal Democrats, but they are pro-Western. They are modernist in the way that they look at their economy and so forth. The ultimate victory over Hamas, the ultimate political victory, I believe. The military victory we are achieving at this, as we speak, but the political victory is peace with Saudi Arabia, and I believe there's a real chance.
So, when the peace with Saudi Arabia will be achieved? Your crystal balls. Easy question. Then once you come next year, we will see if you were right or wrong, or who was the best.
I think it will take a while, because I think the Saudis will wait to see any declaration from the Israeli side regarding the Palestinians, first of all. However, I think the time is changing, and I think in the past, few months or year, they demand that there will be first an Israeli declaration and then normalization. But now I think there are more interest from the Saudi side to cooperate with Israel. I think the Saudis are quite afraid for what is happening in Syria. They are worried, and they're quite sure that the Israelis can help them. Again, maybe they can gain more power in Syria, and for that they will need the Israelis. And I think, therefore, I think that in the last few months they said Palestinian first. I think now they said Syria first, and then the Palestinians. So therefore, I assume it will take 6 months to 1 year to have a normalization.
So we are talking about 2025.
Yeah.
So when I heard Trump's proposal about Gaza, I was trying to understand, what's going on, what could be behind it, and I thought, we saw the way Trump behaved with Canada and with Panama and with China. I thought this is a negotiating tactic. What is he trying to achieve? And I thought this is a good way to get the Saudis and Emiratis and others in the region to be active, to find their own solution, because the alternative is the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip, and no one really wants that. It's not very realistic. So in that sense, I think Trump's proposal could be a catalyst for moving normalization quicker. In a way, just as you might recall, the Abraham Accords, the Emiratis and the Saudis came out and said that they prevented Israel from annexing the West Bank, so they can say that they are saving Gaza, preventing the Americans from taking over Gaza. And in terms of the time frame, I agree with you, Yossi. I think maybe, if we're lucky, 6 months to a year, but it depends. I think it depends if this Trump gamble here works or not, because it could also, at the moment, we see very strong anti-American sentiment from the Saudi Arabians, but I think they will come with a proposal that will help lead to normalization.
Yeah, I think you used the right word. It's a crystal ball. Everything we say here is just guessing. I think we were very close to normalization before October 7. It was very clear that October 7, one of the incentives behind this attack was to sabotage this effort, and the Saudis didn't like it, and they still have it in their mind. At the same time, I think things changed. It became, it pushed the Palestinian issue to the center of the arena, and the Saudis, as leaders, as Mark said, leaders in the Arab and Islamic world, they cannot ignore that, and we've seen a consistent Saudi stance becoming stronger and stronger, saying we will not normalize without a full recognition of Israel, a path to a Palestinian state. We saw Faisal bin Farhan, the foreign minister, saying that, and we even saw the Saudis reacting to Trump's latest press conference, saying, let's not be wrong about it, we mean it when we say it. Now, the question is also, like, are they just trying to raise the price? Because I have to say, I disagree with Mark. I don't think Israel is in the center when Saudis look at things. They want things from America, and they are willing to pay a price by normalizing ties with Israel. It's not as if they want to normalize ties within Israel, and then the rest is just something it's a marginal gain. They need their strategic partnership with the Americans, and they are willing to pay a price with Israel. But I think they got to a position where they see, if Israel doesn't find a way to solve the issue with the Palestinians, we will pay a price for this relationship. So it should be a component there. Netanyahu will not be able to deliver it through his current coalition. He might need to have some sort of a shift in the coalition for that. Or an alternative will be that the assurance that there will be a Palestinian state will come from the Americans and not from the Israelis. And that will allow Netanyahu to save his coalition in a way, and maybe the Saudis will go for it. But I think I agree with my two colleagues. By the end of the year, I think we will see that happening.
So what is the price the Israel to pay for the Saudi deal? Is it this understanding of the Bar Ilan speech of Netanyahu, of Bibi going back and understanding the path to the statehood, or is there anything else, and can it be managed without the early elections?
Okay. So there's a number of prices that Israel will have to pay. I think it's worth paying the price, but there are a number of prices. What we haven't talked about is we're talking about, and Eli is 100% correct, they want a better relationship with the United States, and the key is to open the door is Israel. Yes? I said before, they're not doing it because they became Zionists. They're doing it for their own interests. And as part of this deal, Israel will have to somehow accept more modern and more up-to-date military equipment in Saudi Arabia. There was even talk under the Biden administration that the Saudis want a civilian nuclear program. And these are things that are very difficult for Israel. And we might have to compromise on some of this. I don't know on what we will compromise and what we won't will compromise. We have a commitment with the United States they have committed to us to our qualitative military edge. But there could be some very difficult things here for Israel to get the deal. I think it's worth it, yes? But to say that it's not going to be without challenges for Israel. On what Eli said about the Palestinian track, I actually think that could be easier than some of the things I just mentioned. Why? Because the Saudis, they don't say you have to establish a Palestinian state and then we agree to normalize. The Saudis, as Eli said, they talk about a pathway to a Palestinian state. In other words, they want words. And I think for a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia, Netanyahu can give those words. And there is historical precedent. At Camp David in 1978, Menachem Begin, the first Likud prime minister, he agreed for peace with Egypt to recognize the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. It was words, yeah? But I think for peace with Saudi Arabia, Netanyahu can give words. It could, as Eli said, maybe cause him some problems with the coalition, maybe yes, maybe not. But if he goes to the Israeli people as the man who won the war and now is winning the peace, that's not a bad way to go to elections if the government is falling, from his perspective, yeah? And so I think the obstacles to a deal with Saudi Arabia can be overcome. And if you asked at the beginning of your question, I think 2025, very high chance.
I'll just add one small detail. In Trump's first administration, let's not forget, Trump already put a peace deal between Israelis and Palestinians on the table, the deal of the century, right? And that deal, at the end of the road, said, here are the conditions of, if the Palestinians meet all of them, they will have a state. And Netanyahu was supportive of this plan. I think he published an article supporting this plan. So it's not as if this would be something completely new. It's already been there. Netanyahu was there, Trump was there, and they were talking about that before. So it's not impossible.
By the way, I fully agree that the civilian nuclear program will be part of it. I'm not revealing any secrets because I don't know, but I would bet today that it was already agreed by Israel, and I'm sure that it's going to be built by Korean-American consortia because there is no other alternative. But how the situation in Gaza, after this first phase and the hostages are released, how that can complicate the situation for the Israeli government potentially falling apart or not, for renewed fighting or the military operations which can then slow down or stall or freeze all the negotiations. So how Gaza and the situation in Gaza as it is, how it can affect all those like broader international deals to be coming into life?
I think that Israel, first of all, Israel can't take control of Gaza, can't rebuild Gaza. It's not something that Israel can do, so we need to be realistic about that. The question is, what do you do instead? One option is that the US takes over Gaza and builds the Gaza Riviera, as we heard. Another option, which I think might be a better one, is to use regional cooperation to leverage the Gaza situation in order to show that regional cooperation can actually work and push forward with that vision. During the war, you have seen Jordan, Indonesia, the UAE, other countries in the region already being involved in aid, etc. So I think it will be very important to try and move along those tracks. It will mean that Israel will have to give up some control. Now we have seen, at least in recent weeks, signs that Israel is willing to do that, with Palestinian Authority taking control of some of the crossings, etc. I think if nothing happens, if it stays the way it is, then that will be a big problem in terms of moving forward in the region. On the other hand, if the region becomes involved in the situation, and we're a bit lucky, then it could be a catalyst for regional cooperation.
I think we need to divide between what we hope and what is more realistic. Okay, we hope that someone will do our job. Okay, we hope the Americans will enter Gaza. We hope the Saudis will rebuild Gaza. We hope the Emirates will take control. Realistically, I think we spoke about the Saudis. I think that the Saudis will demand, that's the price, will demand that Fatah will control Gaza, okay? And for that, they will give support to the new regime in Gaza, that it is their interest to expel Hamas, especially now with the new situation in Syria. They don't want to see Muslim brothers in Syria and Muslim brothers in Jordan, Muslim brothers in Gaza once again. So in return for Fatah leadership, Fatah authority in Gaza, they will give funds for the Fatah, for the Palestinian Authority. And it seems to me that Gaza will look like what we see in the West Bank. We see a Palestinian Authority, we see Israel entering these cities from time to time to clean Hamas, to clean terror cells in West Bank, and hopefully we'll see a change. I'm not optimistic. I will see a change in the coming decades, not so soon.
Yeah, can Fatah realistically control Gaza once it is not able that much to control the West Bank? Okay.
Well, if you ask people in the army, you ask other people, well, they say that's the optimal. That's the optimal we can. Okay, the Palestinian Authority is in between Israel interest and maybe the Palestinian interest. No one likes the Palestinian Authority. We are not happy with the Palestinian Authority. I assume the people in West Bank are not happy, but that's the situation. They are the only ones that can really control the situation in the West Bank. Otherwise, it will fall into the hands of Hamas. So I think if you look at the surveys on Gaza before the war and now during the war, you see that the Hamas has around 30% of support in Gaza, around 30% to the Fatah, and 10 to 20 the Islamic Jihad, and the rest are not choosing. So there is a support in some places for the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. I think that in the end, and we see it already, we see it in Rafah already, there are people from Fatah who control the border. So if we are realistic enough and honest enough, I think that we will see Fatah.
So in 5 years from now, rather yellowish flag of Fatah than the American flag flying over Gaza.
Yes, right? And that's the optimistic scenario.
Okay, so let's turn now to Iran, because another disruption can be Iran. Okay, Iran is rushing to the nuclear capability, according to all those reports and even from the International Atomic Agency. So the window of opportunity to stop Iran may be closing, at least in the view of some. How likely is the military solution of the Iranian nuclear program this year? And what the American policy and what Donald Trump's policy be regarding the Iran and how to get Iran to behave more according to what Donald Trump would like it to behave?
I think, well, I don't think Trump has an appetite for a military attack on Iran. He said it very clearly. As he vividly put it, let's sign a new deal and make a big Middle East party. But at the same time, it's, I was referring earlier to the fact that the Iranians were hit very hard. I don't think they saw it coming. I don't think they saw their proxies being so ineffective. They always thought that Israel would be deterred from attacking Iran because they have Hezbollah in Lebanon, and I don't think they could have imagined Hezbollah being hit so hard, so effectively. So in a way, they were pushed with their back against the wall, and it might make sense to them to rush to the bomb. They will look at the, they already have history, examples of Saddam Hussein, of Muammar Gaddafi, that didn't get the atomic bomb, and look how they ended. On the other hand, they see North Korea that became untouchable because it went through with its nuclear program. So I think we have to be very careful and not push Iran too far, because they might decide that they become a nuclear state, and that might be too late for all of us. So again, the credible military threat is there now, I think, with Trump, and it was not there with the previous administration. So I think that's good. But I think we should not overplay that hand.
But the credible military threat is that, that Donald Trump will allow Israel to do it on U.S. behalf. Is there a credible U.S. military threat with Donald Trump?
I think it will be a joint. If he gets to a point where he says, okay, that's the last option, I think it will be a joint attack. But again, I don't think he wants that. He will do whatever he can in order to avoid that.
So here I'm more optimistic. There's a theory in international relations that goes back to Nixon and Kissinger called the madman theory. That if your enemy thinks you're a bit crazy, it's like having another bunch of divisions. Yes, it's worth a lot. And the Iranians are very worried about Trump, and I'm glad they're worried about Trump. I'm not happy that the Europeans are worried about Trump, but I'm very happy that the Iranians are. They remember Soleimani. They remember what he did. And the truth is, after Trump assassinated Soleimani, they were very, very modest with their response, very restrained, and they were also very restrained with their nuclear program. The big rush ahead on enrichment only happened after the Biden administration came in. I think when you are dealing with regimes like the Iranian regime, the threat that you would use force is a very valuable asset. And I would be very surprised now that if the Iranians would give an excuse to Israel or the United States to act. And I'm actually, my understanding is that Iranian behavior will now be very, very cautious. First of all, they saw what Israel did to them when we took out their anti-aircraft and their radar. And Trump, they are worried. And I'm glad. And so I think, I agree that Trump doesn't want to do he wants to go back to, what was it called, for maximum pressure and diplomatic pressure, and he says he wants a deal. He doesn't want a war. That's all true. But the Iranians remember Soleimani, this is here, and they will be very cautious. I don't expect irresponsible, irrational Iranian behavior. I think they will be very, very careful.
I may surprise you, but I'm glad that Europeans are worried, because it may force us to get our house back into order, to spend on defense and to build our own capabilities. Without Donald Trump, we would not be able to do it. Let's see if we are able to do it with Donald Trump. But, Michael.
Thank you. I'm wondering about what you said about the potential transition in Gaza. I agree that it's hardly imaginable that the Americans can do that. And it will have to be the locals for most part. But in my mind, Hamas and Fatah are not like Republicans and the Democrats in the United States. It's a more traditional society. So do you have any idea who the key people or key groups of people in Gaza are who could carry out such a transition?
I think we're always looking for partners in the other side. Let's be honest, there is no. There are no partners, I'm sorry to say it. There are no partners in the Palestinian society, in the West Bank or in Gaza, who are willing to go to a peace process. We are following we are looking for them, we are searching for them, we are monitoring the social media. Unfortunately not. However, as you said, it's a very traditional society, and people tend to choose organization not based on their ideology, but based on their family choose. If the Hamas is paying, they are going with Hamas. If the Fatah is paying, they will go with Fatah. Well, I think that we Israelis and maybe the Emirates and the Saudis hope for external leadership. For example, Mohammed Akhlan, who's now paying salaries in Gaza. So here is an example for someone who's strong enough, coming from traditional family, which is very powerful in the Palestinian Authority, can pay people, activists, and maybe gain more control. That's maybe a solution for someone who was part of the Palestinian Authority, has enough money, and has a strong support on the ground. Mm-hmm.
When we will see him leaving Dubai and flying to Gaza and being on the ground again?
I think that's the plan. I think that the Emirate wished that he will move, but I think it's premature. It's like I think he's doing, from his perspective, the right thing. The Emirates, I think, are playing a very crucial and important role in Gaza. They're trying to do it very simple and maybe maybe try to do it the way that it should be, slowly, okay, not so fast. And I think there is a chance he will go back and maybe run one day the Palestinian Authority, but it's too soon, because from the Saudis' perspective and the European and others, Abu Mazen is now the leader. Okay, we'll see what will happen after. He will go.
And
he will quit.
The European perspective matters?
Well, as long as they pay to Abu Mazen, it matters. Yeah.
I hope it will stop.
Could incumbent Iranian regime collapse or implode economically under American sanctions, or will it survive them again?
If the Iranian regime can collapse or not under the sanctions or whatever pressure the US administration will put, or now is starting to put again against the regime.
I have a seminar that combines computer science and Middle Eastern studies, in which we are trying to measure the impact of demonstrations in Iran. Okay? So we are following after demonstrations in Iran and trying to understand how strong are the demonstrations in Iran. And every day there are plenty of demonstrations. There are at least dozens of demonstrations. But if you look at the demonstrations, most of them are coming from doctors, or oil workers, and they demand one thing: better conditions, better salaries. Okay, there is no one coalition, okay, like a unified idea against the Iranian regime. So unfortunately, we don't see like a real opposition to the regime. Okay, we see plenty of demonstrations. We see like very challenging economic situation. Okay, we see a lot of problems, but we don't see a strong opposition since the last demonstrations in 2022.
I would just add that I think there's an opportunity to create a bit of a gap between China and Iran, because I think with strong American sanctions, and we saw it under the first Trump administration, the Chinese could drop substantially in their oil purchase from Iran, and that will have a substantial economic effect as well. So I don't know if the regime will collapse, but we could see a shift and we could see another lever with the Chinese. A lot of people talk about a strategic alliance between China and Iran which I don't think exists. I think China is much more focused strategically on Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and there's an opportunity there to change the balance, which I think could be substantial long term.
How you are afraid of Turkey now with new regime in Damascus and Turkey moving closer to Israel? How much that is a challenge and that is a potential challenge, how that is seen?
So, in the real world, you have to make choices between realistic options. And so if you ask me, do I prefer Syria under Iranian influence or Syria under Turkish influence? The two realistic options, so the second is better. Okay? Turkey is a problematic country for Israel. The Turkish president specifically is a problematic person for Israel, a problematic leader. It wasn't like that in the past. As you know better than most, Israel and Turkey had historically very good relations. And in fact, before October 7th, it was a different dynamic. President Herzog had visited there, and there was talk of this, the rebirth of a partnership and so forth. So Turkey is problematic, but Turkey is problematic in a way, and I don't know if my colleagues will agree with me, but it's not, Turkey doesn't say the state of Israel needs to be destroyed. You know? Turkey represents a challenge. They were involved in some of our internal issues in a way that bothered us a lot. I think maybe when you were in Israel. They were supporting Islamist movements inside Israel, and they were causing problems on the Temple Mount in the Muslim holy sites, yes. And we had many reasons to be angry with Turkey, but it's a different sort of threat. It's different, and it's, one could also see a situation where Turkey maybe moves in a different direction. You know, before October 7th, he was in a much better place for us. So there's maybe more hope with Turkey. I don't know if people agree.
Obviously, we see a challenge with Turks. If you think about the war in Gaza and the impact that it made on the Houthis, the attack that the Houthis made on our ships on the Red Sea, that's exactly the threat we might consider from the Turks, since they have a lot of power on the Black Sea, and since Israel is importing a lot of the food from Armenia, from the Black Sea. Obviously, there is a risk for Israel, and we need to consider it. And I think obviously, when you saw the news yesterday that they will put soldiers in Syria, and that means that it will be a challenge for Israel to attack threats in Syria. So I think we, as a result of the war in Gaza and the attacks from the Houthis, we need to understand that Turkey might be a challenge for Israel from the supply chain. And this is something we need to carry and to think how to solve. Yes, I think it's a big challenge.
I'll just add one sentence about the regional aspect again with Turkey. I mean, the Turkey-Syria channel could basically bypass Israel. So if we're talking about all of these connectivity initiatives from Asia through the Middle East, through Israel, now that you have Turkey and Syria, we can forget about Israel and move through Syria to Turkey to Europe. And that's, I think, a problem for Israel and something that we should take in mind, because if Turkey becomes the resurgent power and Israel doesn't take the opportunity that we talked about, then Israel can be very isolated. So that's the flip coin of this current dynamic that we should also be very aware of.
Let me now turn it back to Israel itself, okay? And let's forget Palestinians, let's forget the international arena, let's focus domestically on Israel. Let's say that the worst fighting is over, it will somehow calm down and settle down. What are then the domestic challenges for the Israeli government and for Israel? Is it the draft of the ultra-Orthodox, which is going to be there dividing the society and putting cleavage into the government coalition? Is it the economic situation after those like 16 months of exhausting fighting and which did have definitely some impact, and it may have long-term impact on Israel from the economic point of view? Is it something else? So what to expect on the domestic front? Are those legal issues of the reform of the judiciary, etc.? So what to expect there, and what are the challenges for the government, and how to keep the coalition together, or what is the main challenge then?
So on the economic issue, I will just say very briefly two facts. That in 2024, which was not a good year for Israel, towards the end it got better, but most of the year was not a good year. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange did better than the New York Stock Exchange. You were better investing in Tel Aviv than you were in New York. Second fact, the Treasury bonds of the United States, 10 years, and the Israeli government bonds, 10 years, exactly the same interest rate. Something strange is going on, right? Somehow the Israeli economy is showing itself to be resilient. Now, we've gone down in our credit ratings, but credit ratings are done by experts like us who are reading material and reading the New York Times, and the markets have their own logic, and so for the markets are voting confidence in the Israeli economy. Otherwise, our interest rates would be somewhere else, correct? This is the bottom line. Markets don't lie. I think we have to see what happens until the end of March politically. If the government can get its budget through, and I think personally that after this week with what happened in Washington, it's good for Netanyahu politically, it's good for his coalition, there's more chance that he will succeed. That means we will have this government until 2026. And who knows what will be on the table in 2022 and 26. Up until 2 weeks ago, everyone was saying there were two big threats on the government. One, as you rightly said, the Haredi Orthodox bill, and then the fight with the parties on the right about the war in Gaza. This seems now, at least this week, those threats seems to have subsided. And if this stays the situation until the end of March, then the government, I think, is safe until 2026.
Yeah, I don't want to talk specifically about the government. Let's talk about the country. So I agree with Mark from all the things you said. Like, all of them are problems. The economic one is the least concerning one. If the ceasefire will hold, we'll see the economy booming. And I think this war, in many ways, this war even was good. You know, Israel showcased its military capabilities. You see all the security industries have been, I think they doubled their sales around the world. You see like an operation like the Beepers operation in Lebanon. Everybody says, okay, this must come from somewhere, that a nation that can do that. They have good technologies, etc. So that's not the part that worries me. I think we have an issue with the social contract between the government and its citizens. Over the last 16 months, many citizens feel betrayed by the government. We started seeing many talented young people, families leaving the country because they feel that over the long run, this will not be a place that they want to grow their kids in. So again, it might change, but it's there. The issue with the ultra-Orthodox draft is a real issue. You see, and that's, you don't have a uniform opinion about that. Even inside the government, you see the national religious who paid a very heavy price during the war insist on drafting the ultra-Orthodox. And if we manage to do that, that's also good news for the society in general, because it will bring the ultra-Orthodox into the military. That's the melting pot in Israel, more involved in society in general, in the economy, etc. I think from all the things you mentioned, the division, the social division is the biggest issue. We're seeing more and more of that. We see a politics of identities, and there's a lack of good opportunities to have a real discourse on the merits of the issues. and the discourse is being flattened and being very shallow on many, many different issues.
What did the last 16 months show about the relations between the Jewish and Arabic population? Inside Israel, I mean.
Yeah, obviously. Just mention, talk about the economic situation in Israel. I serve as a consultant the Innovation Authority, and we are amazed for the number of startups people are founding every day. You see, the Israeli economy is flourishing. It's like ironically, because of the war, we have more and more startups, more and more new companies. That's amazing. Regarding the relation with the Arab Israelis, so I have to say that in the beginning it was we were afraid that something will start also inside Israel, and there are two ways to interpret the fact that it was very relaxed and it was stable and there were no threats from the Arab Israeli population. I think that the reasons are, first of all, there were many Arab Israelis who were kidnapped, who were killed, even though they are Muslims with hijabs, like dedicated Muslims, they were killed by Hamas. So suddenly, Arab Israelis understood the threat from Hamas. Second, I think that in the beginning of the war, Israel was very clear regarding any risk to the security, and the message was very clear. Okay, so I can tell you that there were very few protests, if any, very few challenges to the Israeli security. I think, in general, the Arab population understand that Israel is a strong, although the challenges, the problems, is a strong democracy. And I think that we see that the Arab Israelis, when they compare the situation in Lebanon or in Syria, they say, okay, after all, we prefer to live in Israel. So I think the situation is quite calm. The only thing that changed, that before the war, lots of money from the Arab Israeli went to the West Bank. I don't know if you know, every weekend there were a lot, the Arab Israeli are going to the West Bank because it's much cheaper, okay, and wasted a lot of money. I just give you numbers. The Palestinian Authority before the war, the Palestinian Authority budget before the war was around 50 billion shekel. 3 billion of that, it's Arab Israeli money. It goes every weekend to buy fruits, vegetables, whatever. So there is an impact to the war on the relations between Arab Israelis and Palestinians. And now, because most of the West Bank workers are not coming to Israel, you see more and more employees from the Arab Israeli society working in the Jewish community. So I think there's also, from our perspective, a positive impact of the war to the relations between Arabs and the Jews. When it comes to the ultra-Orthodox and the modern Orthodox, then there you see challenges. I'm coming from the center of the modern Orthodox center, which is Givat Shmuel near Bar Ilan University. Next to us is Bnei Brak, which is the ultra-Orthodox center. And until the war, the relations were very good. And now you see demonstrations every Saturday that modern Orthodox are protesting against ultra-Orthodox for not serving in the army. This is something that never happened before. So you see a crisis internally between two very important societies.
Just one thing that we should mention as well is that there's a real ideological, cultural divide within Israel with the extreme right. And in the end, maybe it's manageable, maybe it's not, but those two visions for Israel don't really live together, right? It would be one at the expense of the other at the end of the day, and that would be, I think, a substantial challenge for Israel moving forward.
And my last question related to Israel and to what has happened now. what to expect? Some 7th of October inquiry commissions, and how you will cope? By the way, politically and also regarding the reflection of what has happened, also from the defense military point of view, how that process is going to go now, regarding the failure of imagination what can come from Gaza.
October 7th is an amazing, terrible, horrific Israeli self-inflicted wound. It was an intelligence failure. I don't know how the director of military intelligence, whose single job is to give a warning in advance, failed to do so. I don't know how he can sleep at night, yes? And the military itself, very severe questions about why we didn't have more forces and why, and why the response took so long. Obviously the government is responsible. The government is the buck stops here with the Prime Minister, with the Defense Minister. And I would also argue the opposition. They also, I think, share part of the blame. First of all, the opposition was in power a year before and they did no changes, on the contrary. But when we had, and Eli is 100% correct, we have in Israel, it's a bit like the United States. I don't know what it's like here in Czech Republic, but very polarized politics. It's very difficult to have a serious discussion. Sometimes it's all, are you for Bibi or you're against Bibi, right? We should have a very serious discussion about judicial reform in Israel. It's impossible to have a serious discussion about judicial reform because it's immediately political. And people, it's either black or white. There's no gray, right? And it's not good. It's not good. And I remember saying, and some people from the left said it too, when the protest movement decided to make a weapon out of military service. So they were choosing a very, very powerful weapon. But how did our opponents, how did our enemies see this? How did Hamas see it when there are demonstrations and saying, I'm not going to the army anymore, and I'm refusing to do my reserve duty, and I will not volunteer anymore, and so forth? I think this was terrible. This is one of the things that's why Hamas thought they could attack us and win, because the country was falling apart and the military is falling apart. There was one particular demonstration where one of the leaders of the protest movement stood up and said, we have people from the Golani Brigade, and we have people from the Air Force, and we have people from Shmone Matayim, that's the intelligence, electronic intelligence, the listening people, and they are all refusing to serve. And he's standing up and he's saying this. So it's very powerful from the point of view of the protest movement, yes? But what is Hamas and Hezbollah saying? What are they thinking? So there must be an inquiry. And I think the inquiry has to look at all sorts of things that were happening in Israeli society. And I hope out of the tragedy this can be a learning moment for Israel too, that we can somehow return to having a more civil and sensible discussion. I'm not sure it's possible, yes, but I would hope it is.
Any other comments? Closing remarks? Please.
No, I don't have anything to add. I agree with Mark. I think the mere fact that we even have to discuss whether such a catastrophe merits a commission of inquiry or not shows how polarized the society is. I mean, it should have been taken for granted that after something like that, we want to check what happened in order to make sure nothing like that happens. I'll just finish with again with a positive note. I think we are facing many, many challenges, but at the same time, we could look at the bright side. Israel has risen from the impossible point in which it was beaten in October 7. Nobody could have imagined Israel will be where it is now after 16 months with so many military successes. This is the time to capitalize on all these successes. This is the time to use the hegemonic power, military power, to translate it to diplomatic and political power. There's a position to do it. We have, I don't think I've ever seen so many Arab players in the region throughout the war wanting Israel to win a war against Arabs so much. And this is something remarkable, because this was not only an attack on Israel. The October 7 attack was an attack by extreme radical voices in the region who go anything to destabilize the region against the forming coalition of moderate, pragmatic, realistic governments and people in the region. So this is the right way to frame it. And Israel is not alone in this. Israel should work with all these actors. I think we're invested too much only in America, where we could work with so many other important players in the world. And just with a very personal note also to say, for us Israelis, I think the consistent Czech stance toward Israel for many, many years now is very, very appreciated. I think it's a rarity, unfortunately. And I know you've been ambassador to Israel, and we have a wonderful, wonderful ambassador now, Veronica. And this is really appreciated. We really couldn't thank you enough for being, for keeping this moral compass and supporting us in good times and in bad times. This is very appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. As part of our brain drain attempt, as Israelis, you don't need a working permit to settle down and work here, okay? So it doesn't, Yossi is of course ours, but it's for the rest, okay? So,
I also just want to add a more positive note. I think our situation over the last few months has been much better after a very difficult year or more than a year, but we still have work to do. There's an opportunity to change Israel's strategic position in the world, in the region, and we need to take those steps. And that will include, I think, steps, even if it's just words or a vision towards the Palestinians, but we have an opportunity with an American push in the next few years to make Israel part of the region, and we should definitely take it, because the alternative would be Israeli isolation.
You know, in Judaism, on the morning praying, we are saying confession, every day, confession. And I think it's a good tool to remind ourselves that we are not 100%. Okay? And I think that in order to cure our society and our government and our military, we need absolutely public investigation in order to understand how did we got into this situation, how can we improve our situation, how can we learn from our mistakes. And that's why I think it's very crucial for us to make this public investigation with all the people who are in charge and to understand what can we fix in order that we'll not have this same tragedy again.
So I do thank you. I think, by the way, it is in 3 days that it will be exactly 35 years when Moshe Arens was here in Prague and signed the renewal of the diplomatic relations. So let's hope for another 35 years of flourishing ties. But really, thank you very much for coming to Prague. Thank you for sharing your views. Thanks to all of you for coming. I hope that you have not been bored, and see you next time.
Thank you. Until next time.